I am very proud and honored to be able to welcome to the United Chambers and to the San Fernando Valley. Great to have him back over here, the Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti.
Thank you. Better than pinch hitting. You did great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Dale, for the warm welcome, and thank you for pinch hitting, and thank you, as always, to the Galpin family. And as I always say, I'm not just their mayor, I'm a customer, too. Wonderful deals on Ford Fusions this month, so please ask Table 4 for a good deal. It is so great to be back here. This is one of my favorite events of the year, if not my favorite event. It is a chance to ask the years to tell us things that the days cannot see. And I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes our lives get so intense and so busy that it's like a giant run-on sentence. We never get to pause with a comma, or even stop for a moment with a period, celebrate with an exclamation point, or ask questions with a question mark. And coming here gives me that moment to breathe and to look at the place where I was born and which raised me here in this San Fernando Valley. By the way, I was up in San Francisco yesterday doing some technology meetings and meeting with the mayor of San Francisco, and they said, you know, I'm from the Valley. And I said, no, you're not from the Valley. Silicon Valley didn't even exist as a term when the Valley was the Valley. This is the Valley. So we have to remind them that. But to everybody who worked hard, the committee who's put this together, the one and only Gloria Pollock as well, who is just, where did Gloria go? She always disappears to some table. Where's Gloria? Let's give Gloria a round of applause. We love you and appreciate you so, so much. And to my fellow elected officials who've all been introduced, but whom I love, who I feel so honored to serve alongside. A lot of people don't realize the sacrifices that elected officials make. It seems like it's all a lot of glory and fun and events, but I know the sacrifices that families make, the late nights, the early mornings, and I appreciate what you do. And I appreciate that many people in this room have done it for decades. And we are so lucky to have such extraordinary representation in the San Fernando Valley, in the state legislature, in the city council, in our neighboring cities and other cities that comprise the Valley as well. And as you know, I love coming here because I'm just a boy from Encino. 3 people came up to me yesterday in San Francisco and said, hey, I'm from the Valley. I'm like, where? It's Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Tarzana. There's kind of a feeling when you meet somebody from the Valley, you know each other. Because this place is at once the middle of the world, it's the center of the universe, and yet it's also this kind of great anonymous place that represents everyone and every man and every woman. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't proud to be standing here giving the keynote at the Richard Leyner's Mayor's Luncheon, because Richard was such a force of nature as well and a dear friend. His commitment to this city inspired me to serve my San Fernando Valley and my city. And I want to acknowledge Barbara as well, who is here with us. And thank you for your dual service, Barbara. And we remember, I'm sure Richard's going to send me some notes after my speech, because I think he listens in every single year. But, you know, since I grew up here, the Valley has changed so much. But in one way, it still hangs on to something that to me has been the defining characteristic of it. And perhaps the most important thing we can think about as Americans these days is that it embodies the middle class. It embodies the middle class. Just think about the Brady Bunch house in Studio City. I don't know if you followed the story, but HGTV bought that house this year. I'm sure some of the realtors that are here with us can say for how much. Go Realtors. Love all of you. After a series of twists and turns so dramatic they would have made for good reality TV. But back in 1969, when a TV crew here in the San Fernando Valley was scouting a location for the Brady House, they were looking for a place that didn't feel too affluent or too blue-collar. And the show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz, wanted a house that looked like somewhere an architect would actually live, a quintessential middle-class home. But it wasn't just the split level that represented that California dream. It was what happened inside those 4 walls. A blended family coming together, finding a way forward, all the messy scrapes the kids got into, the misunderstandings, the broken noses, the time that Tigger was locked in the station wagon, and yet everything always got resolved. A couple of you liked that episode too, huh? Alice always had a quip, Mike and Carol always shared a lunch, and the future was always full of possibility. And the Brady Bunch, and in turn the Valley, were about as middle class and about as American as it came. And not all that much has changed in the Valley. I mean, just think about our main streets, from Van Nuys to Ventura, from Balboa to Beverly Glen, Devonshire to DeSoto, Sepulveda to Saticoy. You find entrepreneurs and artists, teenagers who sit outside and sip coffee or skate down the sidewalk where we invented skateboarding, which, by the way, I'll be talking about this later, is now an Olympic sport. No matter where folks from the Valley sit on the economic spectrum, everybody felt that they were on the pathway to the middle class or comfortably in it. And part of that has to do with where our gaze is fixed in the Valley. It's firmly on the future. That old cliche, we don't have rearview mirror in the cars here in the Valley because we're always looking at the future. This is where we look to the sky with wonder and with purpose and help kick off the space age, right here. This is where we tell the stories that feed the imagination of billions of human beings from the productions that we make right here. This is a place where anything is possible. And it's always felt that way here, and I think in many ways the lines between the Valley and Los Angeles have blurred. I grew up on this side. When I met people from that other side, I was like, oh, you look down on us. The Valley really has come into its own as an integral part and even a leading part, the leading part of the city of Los Angeles and the metro area, a place that is now the third largest economy on the face of the earth of any municipal area. Tokyo's number one, New York's number two, and we're just under New York. Think about that. Greater Los Angeles, 18 million people, number three economy, and yet we're 22nd in population, which makes us the most productive per capita people anywhere on the face of the earth in a municipal area. And so that state of the Valley, our optimism, our innovation, our economic growth, is what I want to talk to you about today. How can we preserve the middle class and ensure that it exists for everybody? Because we're in the midst of a once-in-a-generation change. In just the 5 years that I've been coming to you as your mayor, we've slashed our unemployment rate by more than half, and we're not just riding a national trend. We're doing that more quickly than the state, which is doing it more quickly than the nation. So our job growth has been right there at the very top in the United States. We've added more than 162,000 jobs since the LA riots in 1992. When I took over as mayor, we had never gotten back to that peak of jobs. But by year two and every year since, we've added a new peak of jobs to Los Angeles for the first time in decades. And more than even the jobs, listen to this, because those chambers that are the lifeblood of this valley and the city that are here today, we've added 236,000 new businesses. This is the entrepreneur and small business capital of America. But it's not just in statistics that we're on the move. I told you when I came here the first year that I was going to launch a back-to-basics agenda. We're going to do big and bold things, but we're going to start with the little ones that affect our lives, the potholes some of us were just talking about, the paving of streets, the fixing of sidewalks. And we've now paved more than 12,000 miles of road, a new record every year. It's about the same as 4 lanes of a highway from here to the nation's capital, where we could go teach them a lesson or two, I think, about infrastructure. We're trimming a record number of trees, repairing our sidewalks, as I mentioned again, and our city was chosen as the best-run city in America by none less than Michael Bloomberg and Bloomberg Associates, who looked at every big city in America, how we run it, and the work that we've done to bring metrics, open data, to share with you what we're doing right, what we're not, so you can hold us accountable. We were the only city in America to reach the gold standard this past year. And here in the Valley, you're going to see more than $120 million in public works projects in the next year alone. $120 million to build out our rec and parks facilities, to improve stormwater, water quality, and wastewater treatment, and to rebuild our streets and our bridges. As we make our hardscape stronger, more people are coming to visit those streets. Last year, 48 million people came. Even as tourism was down in America, tourism was up in Los Angeles. And we think that we will hit 15 million visitors a year early, 2 years early, a goal that we set for 2020 because of things like Harry Potter at Universal Studios, which we've opened together. I know we've got Universal City in the house here. Our city was the first stop anywhere in the world for a global tour of King Tut's artifacts coming back to this city. By the way, it's the last time it'll ever be on tour, so go see it at the California Science Center. And right next to that, the Lucas Museum George Lucas chose us over many cities that he had looked at to bring the single largest gift of any museum, the Lucas Museum, here in Southern California. So this is a very exciting time for Los Angeles. But that doesn't mean our work is done. And that doesn't mean that new challenges haven't come up. Certain cities are trying to attract more people to come to them. They don't have traffic. Their housing is $20,000 or $30,000 per home. They've got a different issue because there's no investment, there's no activity, there's not enough people coming. We've got the opposite problem. We are moving so quickly and with so much velocity, we have to accommodate that growth and make sure that we can build out the traffic infrastructure and transportation infrastructure and housing infrastructure to make sure that we can preserve that middle-class quality of life that I was talking about. But it starts first with safe streets, and let me start with public safety, because nothing is more important to me than that. That is my job one, to keep you and your property secure. And so when I had to decide earlier this year who would serve as our city's 57th chief of police, I chose Michael Moore, somebody who is a friend to and very familiar to this San Fernando Valley, because he spent much of the last decade here in the Operations Valley Bureau. Excuse me, and you'll get to know him even better, because I'm very proud that for the first time in a few chiefs, he's not only going to be living in the city of LA, you're going to have a chief that's living in the San Fernando Valley. He's an extraordinary leader. He served our city with focus and compassion for more than 36 years. He was at the table when LAPD expanded its patrol hours, its domestic violence programs, led the charge to take illegal guns off of our streets. He helped build the LAPD of 2018, a department that has turned the tide on rising crime. And to all of our officers that are here, because it's not from a chief down, it's from the officers up, I applaud the work that you are doing and that you have done. Here in the Valley, homicides this year, down 5%, Part 1 crime, down 5%, property crime, down 6.5%. Promising numbers, but we are going to stick with them and continue to give resources to our officers to get out on the streets and out from behind desks by civilianizing jobs that we don't need an officer to do because we want them to be out there patrolling. And I want to thank the City Council, who has worked very closely with us on this. Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez and Councilmember Englander and others, Councilmember Blumenfield, who have been pushing this for a long time. We're also, and this is something very important for small businesses, most threats, or many threats, aren't visible. Cybercrime is probably the greatest threat that we have right now in terms of property crime. And so we have taken strong leadership, good timing, Bob Blumenfield right there, on the rising tide of digital threats and leading the nation in tackling cybercrime. In fact, just this last week we got from the federal government millions of dollars grant for our Los Angeles Cyber Lab to extend our work to protect financial, business, and personal information against attacks from cyber threats. We get about 1 billion attacks a month to the city servers, 1 billion with a B. So your computers, your systems are constantly under attack as well. And to the small business, you don't always have the resources. You buy some software, security software, and that's about it. But we've set up a lab that we invite you to be a part of, because what we do collectively now is gather, analyze, and share threat intelligence so that the private sector companies and government agencies can collaborate together to neutralize and stop cybercriminals in their tracks. Let me be clear, our opponents collaborate with each other all the time, but in business we kind of had the silent shame of being attacked. Remember when the attack happened over at Sony? Other studios just kind of looked away and said, thank God it wasn't us. We need to be pooling our resources, even with competitors, because if our enemies are doing it, we should be doing it as friends as well. This is cutting-edge work, and I invite you and your business to be a part of it. It is free. You sign up, and we will give you the fixes to the threats that are out there long before some of the software suites that you have know about them. And if you go to lacyberlab.org, we can sign you up, and you can begin to share also the threats that are coming in so we collectively can defend our city together. Second issue I wanted to talk to you about is, to me, really what the core of preserving the middle class is all about, our housing crisis. I spent 2 weekends ago with my daughter, Maya, at Camp Holly Woodland. I don't know if any of the women here ever went to Camp Holly Woodland, but it's a girls' camp. There, we got somebody over there. And I went there with my mom. I don't know how I got in there as a boy, but I have a picture with my mom at the Camp Holly Woodland sign when I was a kid. And I found out that there's daddy-daughter sleepover camp, where you get to spend the weekend, a bunch of dads with a bunch of daughters. It's about as chaotic as it sounds, but it's totally cool for the dads because like all the crafts tables are done. We just look like we're amazing with arts and crafts, and the counselors make us all look good. But I was talking to one of the dads there who's from the San Fernando Valley, and he said, I'm fourth generation Valley, or my daughter's fourth generation Valley. He works in the entertainment industry doing lighting for the studios. And he said, my grandfather bought his home here in the San Fernando Valley for $5,000. He said, my dad bought his home for $50,000. And I bought my home for $500,000. But I'll tell you something, Mayor. If my daughter only has a home that she can buy for $5 million, our LA story ends. So this is serious business, and I think our realtors appreciate this too. That if we don't build the housing that we need in this city, and the worst permutation of this is our homelessness crisis, but you don't have to be homeless to feel that that middle class dream is out of reach. Will I ever be able to, the more you save, the higher the prices go. And figuring out a way for us to bring the supply of building housing, we don't have the luxury anymore of saying not in my backyard. We have to say where in our backyards and how, and make sure that it looks beautiful and that it's next to the investments we're making in public transit. At the bottom end of this, of course, is our homeless crisis. Since I was 14 years old, I've worked on homelessness. I'd leave from the San Fernando Valley and go to Skid Row and help feed folks and give them socks. And I think if that 14-year-old boy could talk to the 47-year-old man that's before you today and say, it would still be there and even worse, I wouldn't have believed it. And there's plenty of fingers to point. And all of us need to accept responsibility. I certainly do as your mayor. Even if the city doesn't have many of the solutions, we don't have the hospitals or the anti-addiction programs, the social services, we don't get most of the housing dollars. We have police and public works which can clean streets and arrest people, but that doesn't solve homelessness. We've got a mental health crisis, we've got veterans returning from war, we've got folks that are being emancipated from foster care without enough help, we've got people with medical emergencies, we've got trauma from domestic and sexual violence, 91% of the women who are homeless have gone through. So there's a lot of things that have conspired together with an opioid crisis and criminal justice reform that, while well-intentioned, hasn't really brought dollars onto the street to catch people as they get out of jail and prison. We need to collectively solve this because it is not only a moral crisis, it's a financial crisis for us not to hit this head on. Thanks to the voters of LA, not just once but twice, we've passed two measures. And a lot of people say, didn't I just vote for those things last year? Why is homelessness still here? It's the most complicated issue I've ever dealt with, and it will be a decade-long fight. But we had the first downtick this year, just 5%, nothing to brag about, but as the resources start to come out, as 1,000 new people we've hired to be outreach workers, to go out there and be housing navigators, mental health professionals, have now been hired. I am tremendously optimistic. My heart is huge, even as it's broken, seeing people on our streets and living in campers and vans and in tents, that we will and can fix this. And so we've expanded our homeless outreach and proactive engagement. Our HOPE program, which puts officers and public works officials together with our homeless services workers who can help people see a pathway off the streets. Our Bureau of Sanitation has done an amazing job. And this last year, our Valley HOPE teams have made contact with almost 4,000 homeless or mentally ill Angelenos, helped make over 700 referrals to housing. And in less than 2 years since HHH passed, which is the measure to build housing for the worst off people experiencing homelessness, we've added more than 78 supportive housing developments, that's not units, developments in the pipeline, more than 5,000 units of housing that wouldn't have been there if you hadn't voted yes and if we hadn't said we will break the back of this crisis. And this month, yeah, absolutely, thank you. And thank you for your support on that. And this month, we opened the first of many bridge housing sites in downtown LA, because while we're building that long-term housing and have new outreach teams that have never been there before, everybody rightfully asks, what are you doing, council member? What are you doing, mayor? What are you doing, assembly member, state senator, today to get people off the street where I am? And so we came up with a bridge home, which only takes people from the neighborhood where they are into shelters that aren't set up for failure like the past ones, where, oh, you're homeless in the Sepulveda Basin, we've got a bed in South LA. By the way, you can't bring your stuff or your partner or your pet. There's no place to store anything. There's no services, and you got to get out at 7 in the morning. No wonder people didn't come off the streets. This is a place where people can come and stabilize their trauma, get 24/7 services of mental health, of doctors that can come in there, help people after they have a couple months of stabilization, get into permanent solutions that take them off the street for good. And I invite you to come see it downtown, because a lot of the fear that you hear about people saying, no, I don't want this, the moment it opened up, the businesses that were at Olvera Street who were worried about this, and rightfully so, and I never dismiss people's fears, said, this is wonderful. This is now the safest place in our neighborhood. This is a place that's transforming lives. And it moved from the abstraction of those people to the guy who was 20 years on the streets, who's a senior, whose buddy went into board and care, and he finally said, I have to come off the streets because my bones just hurt so much. And when he spent his first night in that facility, he said, it's the first time my bones haven't hurt in years. Or the woman who was experiencing schizophrenia, and we were able to get her into permanent supportive housing and to stabilize her life for the first time, where the voices aren't loud in her head anymore. We all know somebody in our families or very close to our families who are experiencing mental health crises. We've lost too many people to suicide, to overdoses. We are going to show that we have a huge heart in this town, and I'm so proud to be working with Valley Council members in Sherman Oaks and Canoga Park and the Northeast Valley to look for places to make sure we can have those beds and have that option to help people through. And I really commend the leadership of the Los Angeles City Council for stepping up and saying yes. It takes political courage, and I will be there every single step of the way for any site, anywhere, that council members and business communities say, we want you to solve this here, not someplace else, but right here in our backyard. And this valley will not be bypassed when it comes to that. But opportunity isn't just about housing. The middle class dream is really about getting a good job. And I thank the businesses who are here for really being the engine of that. This is manufacturing week this week. And it was an awesome start to the week. I started over at Aerojet Rocketdyne. I don't know if anybody's here from Aerojet Rocketdyne. Anybody here? In Winnetka, right south of the Chatsworth border. It is an amazing facility. Every rocket that took our astronauts on the space shuttles into space was built right there. You see every single mission without one failure. Obviously, we lost 2 space shuttles, but it was never the rockets that were built here. That had an amazing imprint on the history of this country, this world, this universe. And they're still making them. They've got a new rocket that may take people to Mars. Right here in this San Fernando Valley, they're making that. And when I saw that creativity, by the way, and you think manufacturing is leaving us, there's 180 people they just hired recently, and there's 140 jobs open today at Aerojet Rocketdyne. And it embodied for me that sort of mission to space, that moonshot that we successfully helped do here. What is our moonshot for that middle-class job here now? It starts with young people. When I became your mayor, only 5,000 summer jobs were available to youth. How many people participate in a summer jobs program? We have so many city employees that started that way. People who are now general managers of our departments who had an opportunity because they came from the wrong zip code or they came from a place where they didn't know anybody. We not only doubled that my first year, we then tripled it by the second year, and we're on our path to do 20,000 youth summer paid internships, not get my coffee internships, but learn about the entertainment industry, learn about STEM careers, learn about going over to Comcast, which has been a great partner, or Spectrum Cable, or those things that will actually give them a career, not just a job. And we know that it then takes them from high school and a good summer intern opportunity to what was mentioned in my introduction, community college. We need to make college accessible if we're going to keep the middle class in this country. Since I went to college 20-something years ago, adjusted for inflation, the average tuition is up 81% in America. In the last decade, college debt has doubled. That's not the American dream. California was defined as a place you could afford to send your kids to college, which is why we started with what we had in our great partners in the community college district, and I raised private money to make this the largest college district in the country, to make community college free for every LAUSD grad willing to go full-time. And in our first year, which was just finished this past academic year, we boosted LA public school attendance at our community colleges by 40%. The state then followed and made it free statewide. We added a second year, and the state is about to make it free for a second year as well, which I commend our legislature for. As was mentioned, I'm a foster parent. My wife and I have a foster son, Tommy, who is 25 years old. He graduated from North Hollywood High School. He barely got through school, like so many kids who experience the trauma of going through foster care, but he did graduate with a high school degree, beating the odds. But he was drifting for a number of years. And I said, you know, he was working in restaurants and he loved cooking, and I said, why don't you connect with a program at one of our community colleges? And he got into trade tech, and he got into this chef's program, and he was the first to show up every day for class, and the last to leave. And his first final exam, he came back, it was 200 questions, and he said, kind of sheepishly, I said, how'd you do? He said, I did pretty well. I said, what does that mean? He said, I only missed 2, and I was number 1 in the class. And the first time in his life he had ever been number 1 academically in anything. Community college and our trades can connect us with the passions that all of our young people have, and sometimes have just been shut out of learning. So it goes from those summer jobs to that, and then it goes towards making sure that we have entrepreneurship. After I was at Aerojet Rocketdyne, I went over to Toolbox LA in Chatsworth. I know we've got some folks that were there in this audience today. It's a community of creators that are envisioning tomorrow's technology. It's an incubator and a maker space right here in the heart of the valley. And you won't find cubicles, but you'll find 3D printers that are rendering new items that are being sold. A team of scientists working in the biotech area for cosmetics, the next generation of cosmetics sold to millennials. You see Just Valley adjacent, the youngest billionaire in US history, simply because she was able to sell her cosmetics using Instagram and create her own line. Folks were there at the Toolbox LA rendering images for a hologram that you'd have to see to believe. Later that day I went to, in Boyle Heights, Walker Foods. Anybody know what Walker Foods makes? El Pato. Anybody ever had El Pato? The first canned salsa in world history, they claim. And I love it. It's an LA story of an Irish family that makes Mexican food, only in LA. And it's assisting those businesses to stay in business. They pay a great living wage to their employees. And the 9 city business source centers are a place I hope you have all gotten to know, because we provide guidance on how to start, manage, and grow a company. And last year, our Valley Business Source Centers served nearly 1,000 clients, offered more than $11 million in access to capital and loans, and created hundreds of good new paying jobs. That's your city at work, working for you and with you. And we do these things because we do believe in that middle class. We know it is one interaction away. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the greatest thief that we have. And it has nothing to do with anything LAPD has to worry about. It is traffic. It robs us of so many precious hours of our lives and so much money in our productivity. It is taking us away from tucking our children into bed. It's circumscribing our dating pool. So you take out the map and you're like, that's too far a commute. I can only date people right here, right? Do the single ladies know what I'm talking about? And men. That's why we came together. And I try to govern not thinking about the headlines of today, because you'll get good and bad headlines. But all of us who are elected officials know it's really when we're no longer in elected life and we look back and open that newspaper and say, what did we know that we did, even though there's no credit left, that we did the right thing so that nobody after us says, what were they thinking? Why didn't they do something 10 years ago? Which is why we put Measure M before us. And we sat down and listened to the Valley, because the Valley had been bypassed last time. And you had great champions, Councilmember Martinez, State Senator Hertzberg, your representative on the MTA board, Councilmember Krikorian, who does a great job fighting for the Valley. And we made sure the Valley would get its fair share and then some in Measure M projects. And so we passed the largest initiative in U.S. history ×2 at the local level. Get this number just on jobs alone, 787,000 jobs. No, careers, because they're not going to just be for a year or two, are the result. That's the middle class. These are jobs you can't export someplace. Building the trains that'll move us through traffic, building the tunnels, the operating engineers, the folks that'll actually be on the buses and the rapid transit lines that we have. And I crisscrossed LA County campaigning for Measure M, and we're not wasting time getting to work. Already after it passed, we came up with 28 by 28. In time for the Olympics and the Paralympics, we want 28 projects to be further accelerated, to open before the Olympics and Paralympic Games arrive. The East San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor is one of those 28 projects, and we finally cut the ribbon, or broke the ground, I should say. We haven't cut the ribbon, in case you didn't notice, but you're going to finally see light rail coming down Van Nuys Boulevard. How many decades after we've talked about it? It will be there. And that's just one of the 4 large projects here, from upgrading the Orange Line, from the Sepulveda Pass Tunnel, or we're actually listening to All sorts of pitches from innovative transportation companies who are looking at things like maybe monorail over the pass, which would be about a third or a quarter the price and maybe get us from the North San Fernando Valley to LAX instead of just a tunnel from Sherman Oaks to UCLA. The bus rapid transit lines that will connect us to CSUN and connect us to Pasadena. But I do want to say something because it is election season. This stuff is enabled too by SB1, the so-called gas tax, which is right now on the ballot for repeal. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to take off my mayor's hat. I would love as a driver to be like, hey, yeah, let me save a few cents at the gas pump. But a few less cents at the gas pump. By the way, the gas companies don't have to lower their prices. They could keep them there and gain that reduction of the tax. So there's no guarantee that your gas prices will even go down. But we all know we pay much more per year in broken axles, blown tires, in an earthquake when we can't continue the work we're doing on overpasses and bridges that need repair. People will lose their lives. We need to defeat Prop 6. Business is behind this. Labor is behind this. Folks, everyday folks who recognize this cannot be spent on anything else. It can only be spent on transportation, and you get what you pay for. Your house, if you don't want to make those investments, sure, you can save some money in the short term, but you will pay for it in the long term. And that's why we have such a consensus, and we need to make sure that gets defeated. While I'm on propositions, I'd also say vote yes on 1 and 2, which will help us with our housing and homelessness as well. But we know that LA County's population is expected to grow by more than 500,000 people over the next decade. And we need to prepare not just for the transportation that will enrich our lives, but the last thing I'm going to tell you about, the very last thing, which is the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. Because a year ago, when I came before you, we were just on the verge of winning. And I come back to not only a once-in-a-lifetime, but for many of us, a twice-in-a-lifetime opportunity. To have the Olympics back here at home and the Paralympics for the very first time in 2028. Now, how many people remember the torch coming through the valley in 1984? It was amazing, that feeling of the world coming here. But while the torch was here, no events were. And so I said if I was going to go after this as a Valley boy, we were going to make sure that we brought events here. So this time around, instead of having a single concentrated Olympic park, our pitch was to use existing venues and to have 4 clusters. And one of those 4 clusters is right here in the San Fernando Valley in the Sepulveda Basin. We have more than 20 events that are slated today to happen in the Valley in more than 3 sports. And my goal with our chairman, Casey Wasserman, talking with Councilwoman Nuria Martinez and the neighboring council members right there like Bob Bloomfield, is to leave behind the best urban sports park in America as the legacy. Because the Olympics are nice, and we'll be proud, but that lasts 17 days. We're here for decades. And I want to see not only the canoe slalom that's going to be there, but perhaps the skateboarding, the BMX, see what we can do to repurpose and to improve our golf that's there. We really can bring a lot. You pitch one thing to win the Olympics. Now the sky's the limit. So I would ask San Fernando Valley, fellow Valley boys and girls, to think big and to dream big about what we could do here. We could even put surfing in the Valley because the surfing folks want a set wave that you can build anywhere instead of off the coast. We could do huge things right here in the San Fernando Valley. And our games plan doesn't require any new permanent venues. And we will make probably between $1 billion and $1.5 billion profit. And this is the first Olympics that gave us money up front. We said we'd go second after Paris. Instead of 24, which we were bidding for, we'd go in 28. But in exchange for $160 million before the games even start. So you remember what we had in 1984. That money that we made, we put into things like tennis courts in places like Compton, where the Williams sisters suddenly were discovered. Or Russell Westbrook participated in a LA 84 funded basketball league and became a league MVP. We have already started that instead of waiting till after the Olympics. And this summer we started with Swim LA, Let's Swim LA, which allowed us to have double the number of swim classes to our kids. And I'm not talking like from 5 to 10, from 16,000 to 32,000 this past summer. Classes for young people, including right here in the Valley. For kids of color in particular, 60-something% of African-American kids don't know how to swim. 45+% of Latino kids don't know how to swim. And the second leading cause of accidental death for kids under 12 is not knowing how to swim and drowning. So we're saving lives, but we're also going to see Olympians who come out of this effort and the next efforts that we have as well. So Swim LA doubled that enrollment, to 36,000, and with new scholarships that allowed people to not have their parents' income be a barrier to becoming great athletes and being safe in our pools. So in 10 years, when an Angelino hoists that torch one more time and runs it into the Coliseum, lighting a flame that will burn more than 100 feet overhead, the world will see our American city. And they will come here to events to see our San Fernando Valley, a city that has made by then a decade of historic investments, created extraordinary new opportunities, addressed the deepest challenges like traffic and homelessness, and made those a thing of the past, who's been able to find those businesses and say, yes, you need to come here, and work across the aisle to reform things like CEQA and reduce our regulations, even as we do things like raising a minimum wage, because we can do both. I know Democrats are only supposed to do one of those, and Republicans are only supposed to do the other, but we can actually do both. Aren't you depressed watching what's happening in Washington? I mean, every single day, for all sorts of reasons, but outside the hearings for our Supreme Court, what made me almost as depressed was watching Democrats and Republicans just yell at each other. Since when did we put party before our country? Since when did we put our insults and our tweets and our counter-tweets ahead of progress? It is time for us to model right here that, yes, maybe there are two Americas, but it's not red and blue or coastal and heartland. It's Washington and the rest of us. And here in the heart of America, we still get things done. So thank you for your work in making sure that this will be that city in 10 years. A city where no one suffers, a city where opportunity is right around the corner, a city where young people can grow up, as I did here, and see their promise, not just on the Brady Bunch house, but on that point on the horizon, that they see someplace in the San Fernando Valley where they realize not only are they lucky to be from here, they're going to spend the rest of their years here, making a great life for all of us. Thank you to the United Chambers, and thank you for this great honor. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the excellent work you do on behalf of all of us in the Valley and in Los Angeles. Thank you.